All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started, as I'm sure we'll have a few more people trickle in as we go here. My name is Joel Hoff. I am the Director for Consulting and Creative Services at Unique Venues. Most of you probably know me in one capacity or another, whether it was a lot of the webinars that I've done over time, especially during the pandemic in 2020 or 21. Some of you on this list, a couple of you are consulting clients that I've worked with either on business plans or on design projects. So it's great to see you in here today. And others, you may have just seen my face on advertising that Allie sends out on a regular basis. So if I haven't met you or interacted with you directly, it's great to meet you and see you today. Really excited to talk to you a little bit about Sales Plan Bootcamp today and fill you in on the details about what we offer. And what you get out of it. And again, I really, if you have any questions at any point when I'm going through, throw it into chat, throw it into the Q of A. If I don't see it, Allie will flag me and make sure she gets my attention, and I'll answer things as we go along. Probably be some time for questions and answers at the end as well, too. Here's the agenda for today. We'll talk a little bit about what Sales Plan Bootcamp is, what the format for Sales Plan Bootcamp is like. I will then kind of talk a little bit about the sales action plan product or tool that you're going to develop through your experience in Sales Plan Bootcamp, show you a little bit of an example of what that looks like, talk about the costs associated with participating in Sales Plan Bootcamp, and then go through the timeline for you as to when things will unfold this year. Just so that you know, a little context for Sales Plan Bootcamp, for several years leading up to the pandemic, Sales Plan Bootcamp was offered as a fully in-person, week-long, 5-business-day experience. So you'd come in on Sunday, spend Monday through Friday working on stuff, and then Friday evening or Saturday, you'd head back home. When the pandemic hit, obviously, we weren't meeting in person. So Sales Plan Bootcamp didn't happen for 3 years. And then we rebooted Bootcamp last year by offering it as a hybrid product. And so you'll see as we go through today that some things are done by you as the individual attending prior to us being on site for 2 days now, later this year in October in Chicago. And that will be done through a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous modules, so things you can do on your own at your pace, or at least once a week, we try to do one session where we get the cohort together with a live presenter that's giving a presentation on a particular topic, just so that you can start to get to know who the other people are that are going to be attending, build a network of people that are going through the experience, and have that direct access to myself and Chuck Salem and the other presenters, specialists that are a part of delivering the content for the module. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it again this way this year. We've had some conversations, and we'll be interested after this year, if you participate, to get your feedback as well on whether we stick with the October timing or we push it back to where it was in January, that sort of thing. But for this year, we're running it pretty much along the same time as we did last year. Now, what Sales Plan Bootcamp is that it really is designed for individuals who are tasked with some level of sales activities for the venues. Now, you may be a full-time sales manager, and if you are, congratulations, and you're lucky, because at least you're not being asked to do operational stuff and sales stuff and management stuff and whatever else gets thrown into all of our job descriptions in this day and age. But we know most people, most of the venues we work with, not a lot of them have full-time sales staff. And so this is especially valuable for someone that is tasked with doing both management and operational and sales activities that maybe just never has the time to sit down and focus on developing a comprehensive sales plan. This gives you the ability to dedicate a few hours a week for 5 weeks later this fall, and a couple days in person on site to actually doing the necessary work to review all of the things that you have done or want to be doing, and then developing a full action plan that you can put into place and follow, or assign to team members to follow. But at least this gets you that structured planning and gets you the ability to have something that you can show to a supervisor, you work with your team, or that you can just pin to your board and work yourself to make sure that you're staying on track with the sales activities that you want to do to grow your business. The boot camp then establishes the framework for foundational and targeted marketing, sales, and outreach activities. And I want to be clear that while we do say marketing in a lot of our materials here, and marketing is important, we also know that for a lot of you, you probably have someone else on your team or in your organization that really handles the higher level marketing. So this is not a graphic design boot camp. This is not a Google Analytics boot camp. We're going to touch on these things a little bit throughout the sales plan boot camp process. But really what we're focused on is saying, what are the foundational sales and outreach activities that you should be conducting to reach an audience, build awareness, and get them into your funnel to try to move them through to a booking decision? Or what are the outreach activities? What are the things that you need to be going out and do in a targeted environment to be able to attract the right kinds of business? So are you ideal for corporate holiday parties? And if so, do you have a really good sales plan that lines you up at the right time of year to fill your space with as many corporate holiday parties as possible? Or are you just perfect for religious groups, and part of your sales action plan is going to be around identifying, attracting, and getting the word out about what a great location your venue is for religious gatherings and conferences and meetings and those kinds of things? And so everything that you can possibly think of is going to be included in the structure, and it's up to you then, working with us and working with the network of colleagues around you, to whittle that down to what's specifically right for your venue out there. When you're done, it's going to provide you with an actionable 3-year sales action plan in Microsoft Excel, which I'll show you a little bit later in the presentation here, that you can use to manage your sales and outreach priorities. So again, you can add columns, assign them to people, yourself or other staff members. You can put target dates on them. You can put completion percentages on them and keep track of where you're at. Again, it's really useful to pull out in the beginning of a staff meeting and just say, hey, here's the 6 things that we should be working on. Where are we at? And carry that through, not just on a couple meeting basis, but throughout ultimately 3 years of sales action cycle, to be able to make sure that you achieve the goals that you're chasing after. And finally, then it assists with budgeting and return on investment calculation for your sales and outreach activities, which can be really critical, especially if you have to take a budget for potential marketing and outreach activities to a supervisor or to a committee or wherever it goes to get approval. You're going to be able to show them a comprehensive, well-developed plan with estimated budget amounts as well as estimated return on investment amounts if you actually implement that strategy, which is oftentimes the way that supervisors or chief fiscal officers or those folks are looking for that information. So I'll stop there really quickly and just see, does anyone have any initial questions about Sales Plan Bootcamp or anything that I've gone over, at least as we talk about what it is and why we do it?
So far, we don't have any.
Perfect. Then I will keep rolling along. So in Sales Plan Bootcamp, there are 5 core concepts that we explore, and they're listed here. The first one is the sales plan framework. So we're going to talk about what the sales plan looks like and what all the different elements of the sales plan are. And we go through, and you're going to see all the modules here in just a minute related to these. Oh, Dana, I'll get to that as soon as I finish this slide. I'll come back and tackle that question. 2, the second core concept is foundational sales and outreach initiatives. No problem, Dana. Foundational sales and outreach initiatives, these would be the things that more are around building awareness or casting a wide net to identify planners and individuals that may want to use your venue for a meeting or event. And so these would be things like website, digital collateral, social media, your CRM, third-party marketplaces, different foundational things that you could or should or probably are already doing that help you get people into your funnel. But then the third core concept is the targeted sales and outreach activities. And while there's definitely elements of that, as well as getting the targeted groups into your funnel, these also drive people deeper. And so it gets them from discovery through interest into evaluation and hopefully to the booking level of making that commitment to contract with you. The fourth core concept is sales plan development. So once you've kind of identified all the things, how do you put it all together in a framework that says, here's what we do in year 1, here's what we do in year 2, here's what we do in year 3, and here's how we actually calculate both the budget for that as well as the projected return on investment for that. And so actually, Dana, that's the perfect time for me to answer your question. So we do take into consideration the fact that contracts are canceled. When we develop a sales action plan for a consulting client, what we will typically do is we put together a budget. As we move from year to year, we actually build in an attrition rate. That's an attrition rate for two things. One, it is for groups that are one-time events. So you booked them in year one and they won't be back in year 2 or 3. Even though for a lot of you, I know when you book an event, they tend to come back multiple years or at least multiple cycles into the future if you do a good job with them. Or for those things where you've booked it and it gets canceled at the last minute or at some point. And then in that world, it's up to you to kind of decide what kind of attrition do you build in for that. Because for some people, you make a 50% deposit and it's non-refundable. Other people might let you cancel up to 3 months out or 2 weeks out or whatever your policies are. So, we help you think through that process of looking at the future budget and return on investment amounts to factor those kinds of things in. And that's a great question because, again, I think it's showing exactly what we strive to do here is to help people think deeply about projecting their sales and the return on investment instead of just looking at one gross revenue number or one targeted optimistic number, but to really dig into it and say, what do I think? How do I think life's really going to unfold? And what am I really going to get out of this when I put this plan together? So perfect question. Thanks for asking it. And then, yes, again, it's a big part of thinking about, is this cyclical? Is it one time? Is it, do we, like, for me, having spent 20 years as a fiscal administrator at the University of Arizona, I always think very conservatively. So, we do an exercise at one point to say, okay, let's think about your average group that you book. And if you're an overnight venue, we say, what's the bed nights part of that? What's the food service part of that? What's the meeting space part of that? What's the other services part of that? If you're day only, we take out the overnight part, but we leave the other pieces in. And we say, what's your average group size? What's the amount they typically spend for these things? And I always go to the conservative end of that. So a lot of times I'll be working, let's say, with a college or university that has 3,000 beds. But we may say, for the purposes of the sales action plan, that their average group size is 150 for 2 nights. And then we come up with what do they pay for housing, what do they pay for foods, what do they pay for meeting space, whatever, and say, that's your average group size. And maybe it's $24,000 or whatever that bill is. And so we say, okay, you do this marketing and outreach activity, and from that, you're going to book 2 pieces of business, and they're both worth $24,000. Now, the conservative side of that says, well, that's probably pretty safe because we think you'll exceed that because all it takes is one group of 1,200 to come in for 3 days, and you've just blown everything in that thing out of it. And so, again, we will work with the individuals in Sales Plan Bootcamp to say, how conservative do you want to approach this versus how aggressive do you want to approach this? And you come up with your own answer, and those are the numbers you work with and put into your plan. So again, perfect questions for helping people know exactly where we're headed here. The 5th core concept is project management. So we really only have one module on this, but it's kind of a wrap-up piece after we've been in person, just to remind you that, yes, you developed a plan, but really now the biggest piece of this is to have it be a living document and to work with it and to make sure that everything that you put in there, you or a team member or someone in your organization is trying to execute to reach out and grab those people. So every one of these has anywhere from 1 to 12 competencies that are developed through individual modules. So we'll take a look at them here. So for the framework, sales plan framework, there are 3. There's a module on strategic planning. So that's going to kind of help you get thinking big picture about why you're even doing all of this in the first place. There's a module on helping to think about what are your primary and secondary markets. And then there's one that kind of just goes over the sales funnel and thinks again about those different levels of awareness to interest, to discovery, to evaluation, to booking, and then ultimately to loyalty. Now, what we do with a lot of the pre-work, and all the ones you're seeing here, because they're not in orange, are ones that we're going to do online in an either synchronous or asynchronous format prior to arrival in Chicago in mid-October. And we use worksheets with most of these modules where you'll get a 1 or 2 page worksheet where you'll maybe spend 30 minutes watching a video on primary and secondary markets, and then you'll sit down and spend another 30 to 45 minutes filling out the worksheet and identifying for your venue, what are my primary, what's the high yield opportunity markets, and then what are my secondary. I don't want to forget about them, but if I had to choose between priorities, I'd focus on primary before I went to the secondary markets. And so with with most of these modules, there will be some sort of a worksheet where you're going to be taking notes or doing an inventory. Like for social media, what that worksheet is, do an inventory of all your social media channels and what are you using them for? Who has access to them? How often do you post on them? Do you think you should even keep doing them? Those kinds of things. Because all of that stuff you'll get together and you'll bring with you to Chicago to be able to work on your plan while you're there. So for the foundational activities, you can see we'll do an introduction, and then we'll have modules for each of the main foundational activities: website, digital assets, social media, your CRM, third-party marketplaces, and then other activities, which captures a bunch of others that are important, but not as big and massive as the first ones there that are listed. The targeted sales and outreach is the biggest competency, and there are 12 of them here. The ones in orange will be covered on site, whereas the ones that are in black will be covered again before we get to Chicago. So there'll be an introduction, then there will be modules on data mining. Where can you go to find all of these contacts for planners and individuals? What are the professional associations that you should be connected to? What are the different digital advertising options, and what kinds of things might we do with it, and how might you think about budgets for them? What are drip campaigns? How do you run and manage them? And I have a typo in there from when I retyped my slides today. That's sales calls, not sales calles. If you live in Southern Arizona, that's a Spanish word for street name. But anyways, sales calls, those would all be done up front. And then on the flip side of that, when we get on site, then we will dig into corporate market, association market, governmental market, Smurf market, youth market, film and television market, and internal opportunities within your organization. Now, one of the reasons that we have broken this up this way is because we want the 2 days that you're in Chicago to be work time. We know how hard it is if you go to a conference, you learn a bunch of stuff, and then you go back and you're supposed to do all the work when you get back. It never happens, right? Because you get busy, you're already behind when you get back in the office, and you say, I'm going to get to that, and then you never do. And so we do this work up front to get ready. We get there, and so for the corporate market, for example, we will do a 20 to 25 minute presentation / discussion on the elements around building sales and outreach strategies for the corporate market. But it's a 2.5 hour block that you're going to be working on your corporate market strategy. So the idea is, as a group, we're going to brainstorm, we're going to talk about, Chuck and I are going to give you some things to think about and some examples of ways to think about the corporate market. And then you're going to spend the rest of that 2.5 hours actually sitting there with your Excel spreadsheet, building your strategies, coming up with what are the right ways for me to advertise to the corporate market? What are the local organizations I should connect to? What are the various data mining activities that I want to conduct? Whatever it is that you've kind of culled from all the work we did up front, you're going to get those things into your plan while you're there. Then we're going to repeat that for each of the markets that you see here. Not all of them go 2.5 hours. Some of them go 1.5 hours, because some of these have more to talk about and more strategies developed than others. But we've built that time in there. The idea is when you go home from Sales Plan Bootcamp, we want you to have at least an 80 to 85% complete sales action plan. Because we know if you're that close, heck, even if you go back and you don't do anything else with it, you've got 85% of your plan that if you just start working it, that's going to help you grow your business. And if you go back and finish out that last 15%, you are definitely ready to roll with a very sophisticated plan. And again, you're going to see an example of just a small snippet and a piece of how this comes together here in just a minute. Okay. So that's the targeted and sales and outreach competencies. And then the last two competencies are around sales plan development and project management. So for sales plan development, before we get there, we'll make sure we look at the sales plan format, what we're doing in Microsoft Excel and how it gets used and developed, as well as we'll do a quick Excel basics. So for those of you that don't use Excel often or don't feel comfortable maybe adding rows or formatting columns or things like that, quick video that you watch and do a little exercise so that you feel comfortable coming in the door. Don't worry, Chuck and I will be there on site anyways to help you when you're there in Chicago, but get you prepared. And then on site, after we've done all that work with the targeted strategies, we then circle back around and we do the estimating costs, the prioritization of activities, and the estimating ROI. And so we don't get you bogged down in those details while you're brainstorming and coming up with strategies. We get you to come back around after you've listed them all and say, okay, now let's put the numbers on the page. And that's like the last probably 3.5 hours of our experience together is you working on that and Chuck and I circulating and helping you come up with, here's how you think about the budget, or here's how you think about the ROI with those activities. So I see a call from Nicole. Have we considered offering the Chicago part virtually? We have. It's one of the things that we will go through again this year, and as we evaluate moving forward with what do we do with Sales Plan Bootcamp for the long term. We know that that it is more convenient for some people to be able to not go for 2 days and be on site. But as I've kind of mentioned here, like we're talking about some pretty significant times, 3 hours here, 3.5 hours there, 2 hours there of work time that we feel is really important to ensuring that you walk away with a good plan. And while we can do that virtually, we also know it's a lot more difficult. When someone's, in their office and there's a crisis of the day, it's easy to say, I'm going to skip the workshop today. Or we know that, if we're not there necessarily, I know you promised to allocate the time. But what we have found is what we don't want to do, because we've been in this boat a couple times in the past where someone, not last year, but when we were doing the full week on site. So someone was paying for someone to go for a full week. And what would happen is we spent a lot of the time doing the presentation during the day with the expectation that people would do that in the evening, or at least do it when they get back. And then, the evening rolls around and there's a group of people they're having fun with and they want to go out and, go have dinner or go to a show or whatever it is. And then we've actually had a couple of people that went home and then left their institutions, and we get a call like a month later from the person that replaces them or their supervisor saying, yeah, we paid, $4,000 for this person to go and do this experience and there's nothing to show for it. And so that's why right now we're still looking at offering it as a hybrid approach. And again, I do understand if there are issues about travel or the time out of the office or things like that. We may choose to do a version of this fully online in the future, but we want to give it one more go around this year with kind of working through both the hybrid approach and kind of doing the best of both to see where we take it there. So that may not answer your question to your full satisfaction, but for this year, we're still not doing the Chicago part, the in-person part in a virtual world. So then the final competency out there is what I call project management light. We'll do it about a couple weeks after we've all been together in Chicago. Really it is reminding you to come back around and not just stick the plan on a shelf, but to think about how are you going to actually execute the strategy of chasing after all these wonderful sales action items that you've developed, and how do you work with your team on a regular basis to ensure that you're moving forward with them. So let me stop there and see if anyone has any questions about any of the competencies that I went through or any other questions that are in their mind at this point. You do your typing. Perfect. Thank you, Dana. While you're doing that, I will tell everyone that we have a wonderful location for Sales Plan Bootcamp this year. It is with Loyola University Chicago, but it is their downtown Water Tower campus. So the accommodations, if you use the ones through Loyola, are literally a block and a half from the Water Tower on the Miracle Mile. It is the meeting space is in that building. So if you're staying in the apartments there, you literally just have to get on an elevator and go down 10 floors to where the meeting space is at. And then obviously in the evenings, because you'll have done all this good work during the day, you can then hit Chicago and have a wonderful evening together and get yourself ready for the following day. So Dana's question is, how will you be incorporating one good year coming out of COVID when it's taking 4 years to get back? Oh, yeah, sorry. Miracle Mile is the street in Tucson, and I do that all the time. The Magnificent Mile. Thank you. So we had a lot of conversation in Sales Plan Bootcamp about COVID last year, and I'll be honest, what we all eventually ended up deciding to do for the most part was just kind of deciding that we were going to all take a collective deep breath and let it go. We didn't sing, but we could have. Because at this point, yes, it's been difficult to say, well, let me look backwards at 3 years of, financials, or let me look backwards at 3 years of whatever. And yet we all know that all of that is nonsensical because the pandemic was unlike anything any of us have ever looked at before. And so what we really chose to do, the group last year chose to do, was say, so what did we do in 2022/2023? And for most people, that was, what did we do in 2023? So those people that were from a higher ed institution that think in summer terms just looked at summer of 2023. Those people that were from venues that have year-round meetings and events chose to look mostly at how are we doing in 2023 and said, let's build off of that. And really the idea of the sales action plan is to be forward thinking and saying, okay, if I go out and I do work, I do some data mining, I put together a drip campaign, I develop a specialized piece, and I send all this out to 1,200 meeting planners in the religious segment, what do I think the ROI is on that? And we talk about how to go through and come up with numbers to estimate that. Then you multiply that again, you say, okay, I'm going to book 3 events out of that. You multiply that times your average event, say my ROI for this activity is $82,000. And that's really the more important number anyways, is to be forward facing to say, let's forget about the disaster that was, and let's focus on thinking forward about if I can execute these strategies, if I get the approval for the budget, because again, there will be a cost to mine that data. There will be a cost to develop that one pager. There will be a cost to run a drip campaign. If I spend that money and I get this kind of ROI, here's the yield on that. And when that's put together with 20 or 30 or 50 other strategies, here's what that means for my bottom line. And then you can kind of on your end work with your own financial people to decide, how do you tie that back to what has happened over the last 3 years to what you think happens over the next 3? Is that a reasonable answer? We do take into consideration one-time expenditures as well too. So for example, if we're talking a video, let's say you want a video tour of your facility, we might say that this is a one-time cost, but then in 3 years, in the third year, you might build in a third or a half of that cost to refresh that video. Or you might say, hey, we are going to purchase evaluation software so that we can get good evaluations from our meeting planners and individuals that attend, but that's a one-time purchase, and then there's a $250 annual maintenance fee or whatever. So again, we really will get to that level of sophistication. That's why there's work done up front, and why we spend the 2 days together is to dig into that. And again, the great part of that is while Chuck and I, we do have a wealth of knowledge, we've been developing these things for a number of years. We also we learned a lot last year just by brainstorming with the group, with the ideas that the group came up with for, how do we target some of these things, or what are some of the activities that we can do. So it's a great group dynamic to kind of work on all of that together. And yes, don't worry about budgets intimidating you. We will help you with that. And again, I'm not going to lie. I mean, most sales action, like the sales action plans that we develop for our consulting clients that we do, year one budget might be anywhere between $12,000 to $28,000, depending on the size of the client. And normally we put that together and people freak out because their budget right now is $2,000, or that's large. I had one place we did the budget for the sales action plan, and when I gave it to the team, the VP for marketing for the university said, that's larger than my entire budget for the year. But it was a great opportunity for us to have a conversation about, but what's the ROI, right? So it's not just, hey, I need $12,000. It's like, if you give me 12,000, I'm going to parlay that into 130. And then if you give me 20,000 next year, I'm going to parlay that into 340,000. And by doing that, and even with the one where we had the conversation with the VP for marketing for her whole budget, I said, honestly, I said, because of my experience at the University of Arizona, I know that when you're spending to gain students for the most part, and that's all measured in tuition dollars. And have you ever done work to really track the amount you're spending versus the amount of students coming in and the ROI on that money? And she was like, well, we kind of have. And she said, but this is giving me a way to think about doing it more clearly when I go back through my next budget cycle to help them understand that, yeah, not only do the conference people need $20,000, my budget's got to go up by 35. And what I learned was that they were actually ultimately successful in seeing both, like conferences didn't get 20 and the VP didn't get 35, but they all got more so that they could do that sort of thing. Higher ed members, do I primarily work with auxiliary budgets or ed fund budgets? The answer is yes. So I've seen it everywhere. I've done 37 consultations. Almost all of them were higher ed. Now, I don't want to scare off the non-higher ed clients out there because the strategies and the tool and all the conversations that we're having are irrelevant to who you are as a venue. If you're a museum, if you're a football stadium, if you are a special event venue, everything we're doing applies to you as well too. Scale might be different. In fact, yours might be better because it might be easier for you to get $20,000 out of someone for a marketing initiative than it is for a higher ed client out there. But ultimately, we have seen it all in our time. With all of the venues that we work with, not just on sales action plans, but within all of our marketing, typical, our profiles and our lead generation services and design services. We across the board, we can help you put that together for whatever audience you're sharing it with. Great questions. Okay. I will go ahead and keep going here. If you got more questions, you can get them typed in or you can write them down and we'll tackle them again. We've got a couple more slides to hit here. Here's the program schedule. So there's 3 distinct delivery windows. The first is the remote period, which is September 9th through October 12th. And so again, we will try once a week to have about a 45-minute synchronous session where we will schedule that and say, here's the day and time. I might be presenting, Chuck might be presenting, Scott Fish, who talks about websites, might be presenting. And the reason is it's a meatier topic and we like to have the interaction and the dialogue. Now, it won't be a webinar like this. It'll be a Zoom meeting where everyone's on camera and screen and can talk. And it's a very collaborative exercise that kind of walking through the presentation and whatever worksheet you're starting to fill out at that point. The rest of the work in there will be done asynchronously, which means you can do it when you want. So if you start carving out 2 or 3 hours a week in your work time to do that, that's when you do it. Or if you have to do that after hours or on a weekend, you can do that too. You'll watch a video or you'll pull up a reading or whatever it is, and you'll go through and you'll do the work that way. Also, just know, like, there will be a couple quizzes here and there. Those are more just to make sure that someone's awake and paying attention. They're not high stakes and they're not going to stop anyone from moving on. They're more kind of self-check, self-assessment things. This is not, a for credit course. This is designed just to keep you on track and to make sure that you're getting the work done. I mean, there were people that came in with, stacks of paper like this from all the work they'd done ahead of time, made it really easy for them then when it was time to sit down and work on the plan to just get busy and get going there and make it happen. And then there is that final wrap up the week of November 4th, which is the project management light, kind of a last, hey, you've been home for 2 weeks, how are things going? And then you get access to Chuck and I as long as you need us afterwards. I mean, Chuck and I will always take any email or phone call, and we're happy to talk to you about anything at any time, but it's definitely a part of the course that you continue to have access to us for questions about what's going on with your plan. The remote work is estimated at about 16 hours total. So that's 3 to 4 hours per week, roughly. Now, some people last year said they spent a lot more. They also brought in tons of material, and they weren't really complaining about the fact that it took more. They were really happy that they'd done that work because they really learned a lot about their marketing and sales operations that they just never put thought into before. So it can be a lot more than this if you want to, but it's designed to be, if you just kind of go through and fill out the worksheets without going crazy, it's about 3 to 4 hours per week. The on-site work is estimated about 13 hours. So again, we have 2 full days, but they're not crazy full. We start at 9, We try to get done by 4 to 4:30. There is a lunch in there. So we keep it on pace and we keep it moving, but it's also not like you're stuck in the room for 10 hours at a shot. So that's the schedule. The format, as we mentioned throughout, the remote work will be managed in Canvas. So some of you may be familiar with using Canvas as a learning management platform. That's what we will use. And it includes both those synchronous and asynchronous modules. All the resources will be there. All the videos or links to videos will be there. All of the learning assessments will be there. The calendar will be there. You'll get invited in and ready to go when that happens. And within each module, like I said, there's just this combination of different things. So, we try to keep it, again, the videos are not hour-long videos. They're, 15 to 22, 23 minutes of, someone doing that again, so you can do it at your pace and watch through it, or you can watch part of it and come back and watch it. And you can be using the worksheet and stopping it, taking notes as you go, whatever works best for your style. We've tried to keep it as fresh and interesting and a nice combination of experiences so that you don't get bored as you go through the process there. Okay. Here's what the sales action plan looks like. Now, I apologize that this is a little small. And again, know that there are multiple tabs in the Excel spreadsheet. So this happens to just be one tab, which is film and television, which I lifted from a sales action plan that I did for a client a couple of years ago now. And you can see here what we basically do for each initiative is we give it a name. So you can see there's F2 data mining, F4 prospecting. And then we put together a year 1, year 2, year 3 budget and return on investment. And then we total that so we can see it across the 3 years. And we also color code our activities. So red are activities that we're going to do in year 1. Blue are activities that we're going to start in year 2. And then green are ones that we're going to start in year 3. Now, budget doesn't always align with that because sometimes you have to spend the budget a little bit ahead of time to get yourself going in a particular year. Or sometimes there's no budget at all. Like in this case, there was no real budget for the data mining, simply because the staff there was going to do that work internally instead of farming it out or hiring students to do it. But again, it varies based on what you think you need to do. We'll help you figure out what goes in those cells and how to calculate the ROI. And then below that is kind of a more in-depth description of what that initiative looks like. So for data mining, it was, and this is a freebie for everybody today for attending, you want to do some data mining for film and television, go to yellowpages.com, productionhub.com, and your government listings, which you see the link there. Search for production companies and film studios in your area and use that data to build your database of film and television contacts. Those are the kinds of things that we put together. Prospecting, using the lead sources in the 3 above. Plan to visit 10 potential clients per quarter. Once you've booked a shoot and they've departed, remember to ask for testimonials and referrals. And this one has an additional item in the notes and budget column, which is got a budget for some travel costs and a small giveaway for when you're going out on those sales calls. In this case, the answer is no. There is typically something in year 1. In this case, this was a secondary market for the client. So we had agreed that they weren't going to go chasing film and television in year 1 because they had a lot of other foundational and more important primary markets to chase in year 1. And so we agreed that they wouldn't start film and television activities until year 2. But that's really up to you as to decide where do you want to start each of those target markets. Okay, perfect. Great question. All right. So that gives you a sense. Again, small snippet. There's 7 tabs in the workbook. Some of them, again, might only have 3 or 4 activities. Some of them might have 20 activities. It just depends on which ones are your primaries, which are your secondaries, and how creative are you, or how many ideas pop into your head about how can we go out there and get people into our funnel. Program cost. So here's the bottom line. It's $2,000 for Sales Plan Bootcamp, plus your travel expenses. So those are on your own. But we do include 2 continental breakfasts, 2 lunches during the meeting days on those 2 days, and 1 graduation dinner. So we take you out to a really nice graduation dinner after day 2. So that is included in that program cost. You don't have to worry about those expenses on your own, but flight, hotel, and any other meals and transportation is on yours. But what you get for all of that is enrollment into Canvas and access to all the pre-on-site materials. That access remains after the course, so you're able to get back in there. If you're like, oh, I'd like a blank copy of that worksheet again, you can get in there and do that. Gives you the sales action plan template, which I gave you the little snippet of what that will look like in Excel. gives you all the on-site instruction and support, gives you personalized coaching throughout from Chuck and myself. And at the end of the day, it gives you a final 3-year sales action plan that you can use for your own operational execution, that you can use for budget discussions or for budget requests, and that you can use for ongoing evaluation and review as you go year by year and look at your revenue and expense goals as it relates to what you've built in the plan. So that's everything that's included in Sales Plan Bootcamp. Timeline, registration's open now. It was in the link that you got for this, and it'll be in the link. I'll send out an after action with these slides, the link to this recording, and a reminder of where to go to register for Sales Plan Bootcamp. Week of September 2, we get you into Canvas. Week of the 9th through the 13th, you do your remote work. The 16th and 17th, we're in Chicago on the Magnificent Mile. And then we wrap up that last week, and you can continue to check in with us as you need. In fact, I had a check-in call with somebody about 8 weeks ago with some more questions about where they were at and working their plan and what they could do as they were starting to think about really gearing up for year 2 of that plan. So that's it for me for presentation. Are there any additional questions that anyone has? And again, I'll give people a minute. Just a reminder, it is beautiful in Chicago that time. Do we know if parking will be validated downtown? That is a wonderful question. I will ask. My gut tells me no, but I will double check with Loyola University and see if they validate, or if you just have to park a car in one of the nearby parking garages and pay the daily rate. So I will include that information in, yes, I will include that information when I do that. My personal plan will be to use public transportation, probably both because of the cost of driving in and worrying about parking it. But I'll find out. I'll include that in the after action email to this webinar. Any other questions? I'll give it a minute here. Again, we've used this sales plan product with hundreds of clients that we've done consultations with. It's a very effective way to organize your thoughts, to think about putting together a comprehensive strategy, and to be able to put realistic, conservative or aggressive, whatever you'd like, numbers to the various activities that you need to employ to drive sales and book more business within your venue. And the clients that we've used it with that have followed and executed the plan have largely been very successful. So if you have any additional questions at all, you can always reach out to me at any time. Shoot me an email or let me know you want to have a small Zoom meeting follow-up. I'll be happy to do that. But we're very excited for this year. We hope you consider joining us. And I will get this out to you probably sometime in the next day and a half or so once we get the recording uploaded and we get all the materials together. I thank you for your time, and hopefully I look forward to seeing you all in Chicago in October. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.